Woke up this morning to a couple of things that I pretty much knew were going to happen. The first thing was I was still on planet Earth. I had not been raptured, and so all of the soon coming rapture people were wrong yet again. So that's the first thing that happened that I knew would happen. Second thing that happened was I caught the video by Dana Coverstone where he is continuing to defend himself and protesting that the church around him that he is speaking to is daring to hold him accountable for what he said. How dare we hold him accountable, right? So I'm going to start with some scripture here. Some of this is very familiar to most of you. First one is Deuteronomy 18:22. When a prophet speaketh in the name of the Lord, Dana Coverstone has done so, if the thing follow not nor come to pass, that is the thing which the Lord hath not spoken, but the prophet hath spoken it presumptuously, thou shalt not be afraid of him. Now, what does that insinuate here? Not only does it specifically say that the prophet has to speak in the name of the Lord, which Dana Coverstone continues to do, it also means we are to judge whether or not that thing has come to pass. It's also quite clear that the prophets are going to speak about things that are clearly supposed to come to pass. It's clear and plain what is supposed to happen. It's not muddled. It's not shrouded in mystery. It's not wrapped around some kind of symbolism that we just don't know what it means and we'll never know. We'll just never know. No, we are supposed to judge whether it came to pass, or at least the Israelites were supposed to in the Old Testament. New Testament verse, Paul says, let the prophets, plural, speak two or three, presumably at a time. You have two or three people speaking prophecies, and let the others judge. Hey, Dana, see that word right there? Judge. We are to hold your butt accountable. And if what you say doesn't come to pass, you're to be judged for that, and we're to stop listening to you and not fear it. So, for the record, do I think people have visions and dreams from the Lord today? Yes. Yes, I do. Absolutely, positively. Do I think that they are prophecies for the world around us and for the church at large? No. No. Visions and dreams today are from God to people for them. For them, not for everybody else. God does not speak to his people through prophets anymore. He speaks to them through his Son. And the Holy Spirit, written word of the Bible, and the living word, Jesus. There are no more prophets who stand up and say, thus says the Lord, this will happen tomorrow. It's over. That part of prophecy has been fulfilled. So that's my interpretation of the Bible. Take it for whatever you want to. Look into it yourself. That's just what I think. So let's listen to Mr. Coverstone as he whines and cries like a little baby because now he's being held accountable. See, once again, he's not much different than J.D. Farag or Barry Scarborough or the other Barry or Lisa Liar Boyce or Chelsea. I got a new car for free. Bedell. All of these people basically are along these lines. Number one, please listen to me. I know something. I found out something cool. Listen to me and my speculation and my cool thing I learned about the end times. Everybody listen to me. Listen to me. Follow me. Subscribe. Share with your friends. This is what's going to happen. And then the thing fails. And then they get on and say, hey, I never told you. It's just not my fault. Don't hold me accountable for that. Don't look at me when it doesn't come to pass. Don't get mad at me. It's not my fault. It's your fault. Your fault. You're supposed to be Bereans. Right? Isn't that the pattern they all follow? They want you to listen to them and pay attention and believe them until it fails, then say, oh no, it's your fault for believing. Continuously we see this pattern. They want the glory and the attention of saying something cool that's going to tickle people's ears, but they don't want any of the responsibility when it fails miserably. Right, Dana? So let's listen to this lying liar. Everything that comes out of this man's mouth is a lie, and I guarantee you, he's not even having these dreams. These are all concocted by him on paper, because nobody dreams like this. Nonsense. And if it was from God, they would be 100% true and accurate. Not 99.99999, 100%. They have to be. By the way, the other thing I should say we predicted correctly, it's not just me, is his loyal little followers will continue to hold him up and promote him. And it's okay, Dana. You don't have to defend yourself. We all love you, Dana. Keep going. Keep telling us what we want to hear, Dana. We love you. Because, see, if they admit that he's a false prophet, then they have to admit that they were taken in by him, and people don't like to do that. All right, so I've said enough. Let's go.
A lot of people have criticized me and said, well, your dreams never came true. Those things literally did not happen. And so I've got a question for the critics. And I'm not trying to be a pain in the neck. I want to make a point this morning biblically. Okay. In chapter 41 of Genesis, Pharaoh had a dream. And he said, behold, in my dream, I was standing on the banks of the Nile. 7 cows, plump and attractive, came up out of the Nile and fed on the reed grass. 7 other cows came up after them, poor and very ugly and thin, such as I had never seen in all the land of Egypt. And the thin, ugly cows ate, eaten, consumed, ate up the first 7 plump cows. But when they had eaten them, no one would have known they had eaten them, for they were still just as ugly as at the beginning. So I've got a question for the people that say, well, the dreams never happened literally, so they can't be true. Did the 7 thin, lean cows actually, literally, physically eat and consume the 7 fat cows? Answer is obvious. No, they did not. But Joseph, who interpreted dreams based on his understanding of agricultural symbols, said, Pharaoh, this dream is from God. And this is what it means. There's going to be 7 years of good and 7 years of famine. So you better take this 7 years of good and stockpile the grain, so that when 7 years of famine gets here, you'll be the hero. So he didn't just say, this is what it means. He said, this is what you need to do. In other words, the dream literally did not happen. It was symbolic. Let's look at Daniel. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream.
All right, enough of that nonsense. So a couple of points off the bat. First of all, Dana never told us what the interpretation was to start with. Interestingly enough, he never brought on a person who interpreted it for us. So he's arguing over nothing here because nobody ever interpreted his dream. And then, he never said, okay, yeah, that's the interpretation. He was the dreamer and the interpreter at the same time. And, it's quite clear that's what he was trying to do. Now that he's been caught, he wants to pretend like, well, nobody ever really interpreted this at all. So it could mean anything. Well, let's take a look at what he said back then in October, at November, October. And so first I'm gonna play back the main portion of his November dream that clearly shows he's a false prophet. There's no other words for it. I don't care about symbolism. Listen to what he said back then.
Saw that finger appear, and it circled November 3rd continuously, and it continued in a clockwise direction. And then suddenly, it changed to counterclockwise, and then these images began to appear. I saw cities on fire, which was nothing new. I saw headlines that read, Trump victory challenged everywhere. It was on digital marquees like in New York, Times Square, places like that.
Okay, he's pointing out November 3rd. Is that literal or symbolic November 3rd? Dana, liar. Come on. We all know you meant the election. Then he refers to burning cities, which is nothing new, he says. Literal burning cities. That's what he meant, and we know it. Dana, unlike your followers, I ain't stupid. And neither are a lot of other people. And thirdly, I guess claiming that Trump would win and then it would be challenged by Biden, that's symbolism, guys. Did you know that? That's actually symbolism for the opposite. That's symbolism for Biden would win and be challenged by Trump. Literally, this is literally who we're dealing with nowadays. This is the kind of garbage this is where the curse of YouTube continues to to buy. YouTube is awesome. It's a great medium, but then you have this. You have these YouTube pastors, these fake ministries. It's just crazy. So let me play a couple others just to continue to point out. I'm going to play 2 more clips from him for October, where he does a similar thing.
So I dreamt I was in the month of October. I saw the month of October as a calendar and was waving like it was being blown by a strong wind. Not a
Is that symbolic October or literal October? Dana, liar.
fitful wind, not violent, just kind of a fitful wind, And I saw a finger appear, and it pointed to the second week of October, and it dragged the finger through the third week of the month. So it covered second and third week of October.
These are specific dates he's pointing out, okay? By the way, you notice that he continuously has this finger that points at a calendar, and nobody dreams this way, guys, unless it's really a miracle and from God, which it isn't, because we've already proven that it's not. If it was, it would have come to pass. So his dreams are lies. He's making up this crap. He wrote it down and imagined it all and then said, hey, this is my dream. The fact that this man can sit in front of thousands of people and tell a straight-up lie to their faces is mind-boggling. Mind-boggling.
And then it pointed October 31st, and it held the position. It just kind of tapped it and held it. The first thing I saw was a rock. It came flying out of the sky, and it landed in a large pond. And the ripples started off small, but then they became like vicious waves.
Okay, October 31st is a literal date. It's not symbolic of anything. But I can see that the rock coming out of the sky and landing in the pond, forming ripples, is symbolic. Sure. He didn't say a literal rock was going to fall into a pond and make ripples. Nobody would care.
Like when the wind begins to blow stronger and the ripples start to go further out. I saw federally elected officials, faces I recognize. I saw specific state governors. I saw agency leaders. And I saw just radicals, like the people you'd see in Portland or Seattle.
Are these literal people or symbolic people? Are they faces you recognized as literal faces that you recognized, or are these symbolic recognized faces? We all know what you meant.
Seattle or Minneapolis, but they had wicks coming out of their head, almost like a firecracker wick, like a firework wick.
Yeah, clearly that's symbolic. So I'm willing to make the statement that when Pharaoh had the dream about the cows eating the other cows, he knew it was symbolic. Okay, I think it's rather clear, because if he had had a dream that 7 years of famine were coming, and the dream was literally 7 years of famine are coming, like your dreams are, he wouldn't need an interpretation. It's self-interpreted, like your dreams. Liar.
And the second week of October is when I saw simultaneously all those wicks coming out of the heads were lit on fire. Federal officials had heads that were the shape of like an old M80. Those folks from the 70s and 80s remember those. The governors had heads shaped like the Black Cat firecrackers, the 1.5, 2-inch firecrackers. Everybody else had the smaller, like ladyfinger style firecracker fireworks. And these people are talking, and they're starting to get animated. They're yelling, they're screaming. The facial images went from normal and calm to red face, jumping to an absolute out of your mind primal scream.
Anybody remember anything like this happening literally or symbolically the second week of October? Second week of October was relatively quiet.
Everybody's head blew up at the same time. These people were still alive, but their heads had blown up. And this resulted in sparks and debris flying all over the area where they were standing, and it started fires around them. And then I saw the protests that were taking place, that were still taking place in October.
You guys remember protests taking place in October? Sure. You know what? There's protests happening around the country all the time. It's a continuous thing. And, again, like some others have pointed out, that's not a prophecy. We all know that when there's protesters in Portland, Oregon that are basically hunkered down and they have tents and they're they're ensconced. We know they're going to be protesting every day until they're thrown out. But did anything like he's saying happen in the second week of October, where all the politicians just were screaming like crazy and they finally exploded, quote unquote, symbolically, and then just fires and protests going crazy? Anybody recall anything like that?
It went up another notch because the bystanders who were part of the protests and that were there, that were not being very, very violent and not really getting us involved, the protesters basically said, if you're not doing that, you're not one of us. And they began to assault those protesters who were not deemed as violent or as vicious as they should be.
I'm sorry, Dana, but that's not symbolic. That is a direct reference to something specific that you're prophesying under the authority of God will happen in October, specifically October the second week to the 31st. And none of that happened. So don't try BSing all of us with, well, that was all symbolic. How do you know what that meant? We all know what happened and what didn't happen October 31st.
And I saw some of those protesters left on the side of the road, almost like they were dead. They'd been beaten because they weren't protesting like the other ones were. They weren't doing all those things that they should have done. If they weren't complicit, they were beat on.
Wait a minute, ad coming up.
I saw
I'm going to turn off the sound here.
To watch one of my nephews play basketball.
Yeah. See, you can't be a prophet. You can't be a prophet if you don't have advertising to help support yourself, can you? Jerkweed.
Now, this is what got me. I saw elderly people being attacked. It was if they weren't complicit, they were beat on. I saw the elderly people, and this is what got me. I saw elderly people being attacked. It was an attack on older Americans, the people that hold the Constitution dear, the flag dear.
Symbolically, old Americans? Symbolic people that hold the Constitution dear? Were they symbolically attacked, Dana?
The people that have the common sense values, commitment to faith and biblical principles.
By the way, if you're going to claim that people in this country don't agree with other people in this country, that is, people who hold the Constitution dear versus socialists, if you're going to claim that the socialists attacked the non-socialists in October, that's not a prophecy. They've been doing that for years. By the way, they've been doing that for decades. This is not new. None of this is new. None of this is unprecedented. Go back to 1968 and that election. Go read some daggone history. Stop thinking you're in an unprecedented time period of humankind that's never occurred. Go study history, for goodness sake. That's a message to anybody listening who buys into this end times nonsense.
I even saw people trying to get into nursing homes and nursing facilities to attack older people.
Symbolic nursing homes?
That's what I saw in the dream. And then I saw a $100 bill, a big $100 bill about the size of a flag. It was hanging like a flag on a pole. And it was burning from one corner. And it was being lowered, like at the end of the day. And I saw people with their hands over their hearts, and they were crying because their god of money was just being lowered. It had lost its value. And it burned until there was about a third of it left. It was a celebration. People were celebrating.
All right, see, I'm done now. So, okay, obviously, a large $100 bill the size of a flag being burned in the corner and da-da-da, and a third of it was left. That's all symbolism. But we know what Dana Coverstone is trying to say. He is trying to say that by the end of October of 2020, the American dollar will be worth 1/3 what it used to be, and people will be crying over that. Did that happen? Literally? Or symbolically? I think enough said.